Hey folks, Ariel over here at Fermented. Most of this video was recorded back at the end of October, and I never got it put together, so you are getting it now. It is now Thanksgiving morning. We wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving day from all of us here at Fermented. Now it's Thanksgiving Day and it's snowing lightly. Nothing very heavy. It's very rare for the ground to not be white right now, but it is trying to snow off and on. Folks, we're cleaning out the very last of the vegetables. There are some dead leaves and so on in the garden still, as you can probably see, but the only thing we actually plan on eating that's still in here is the beets from this beet bed. And we have had some very good hard freezes at this point. We've had single-digit temps. I think 6 Fahrenheit was the coldest we had a few days ago. So you can see the rest of the beet tops have all been killed by that. So the beets under the ground are still fine. Now we have been eating beets all summer long out of this bed. Kept pulling the biggest ones and giving the rest room to keep growing. Plus, I don't think I'm going to have any of my, there's some great sized ones, but I think I'm going to have more of these smaller ones this year because this bed needed thinned, or I needed to have better self-control back when I was planting the seeds, and it's just hard for me to not plant too many. The poor little seeds look so little and lonely when you're planting them. Anyway, this should have been thinned back in approximately June, and since I never got to that, the plants were a little thick. So, while we have acceptable beets for sure, I don't think it's going to be a trophy amount. Plus, right here where you can probably see there's a hole dug up, this is what I'm trying to deal with first, because some of these beets were already chewed up by the rodents. I don't believe we had any rodents come in from the bottom because they are blockaded with the hardware cloth, but we have had lice running all over from the top. Even with all our cats here, I think we probably still need more cats because Burley dug that hole trying to chase a mouse that was hiding in the beets, which is why it's nice when the cats can get them because they do a little less damage. I'm glad we have dogs that are also good rodent hunters, but when it's in a place like a garden, they can do a good bit of damage trying to get to the critter. Anyway, this is, like I said, the very last food crop we are harvesting out of the garden for the year. We do have more snow flurries and freezes and such in the forecast in the next few days. It's actually been kind of raining off and on today, but there's a spell here where the sun came out briefly, and so I thought I'd see if I could get this accomplished. It will be fun to see. I think before I get this video out, we'll weigh the total amount of beets that we pull out of here today. If I remember what I have written down from the rest of our crops this year, I believe we're at something like 960 pounds of produce out of this garden for the year so far, which is pretty wonderful. I'm really curious to see if we can make it over 1,000 pounds. That was my private goal last year. If you're new here, welcome. Our garden is 600 feet of actual bed space, basically. That doesn't count the paths in between, and we have nice wide paths so we can easily walk around in the summer when everything's hanging out over. These paths are pretty wide as the plants fill in, and we like to have room to be able to roll a wheelbarrow up and down the paths and such. I definitely have some beet loss where the mice chewed through it. Like that one is pretty much been eaten. We'll just put the rest of it in the compost. So probably would have had a few more if we had less mice. But anyway, the rest of the garden has been very, very productive. It produced 600 something pounds of food last year. And, oh, there's a nice big one. Check out the size of that guy. A couple good ones there. Maybe there's more big ones than I thought. Thought that was very good, but I thought it was capable of doing more. And this year we had several things going on that probably helped with that, so I don't know if we'll be able to duplicate this in the future, but our soil is in much better mineral balance. If you remember the first year here, not sure we got 20 pounds of produce out of the entire garden. It was pretty pathetic. Everything looked mad, sad. We did some testing. We lived in a part of the world where it's natural to have highly, I'm not sure how the word's properly pronounced, calcareous soils, very high in calcium. And if you know anything about minerals in the soil, even if you have enough of some of them, if certain ones are too out of balance or the pH is too... Did you get a mouse? Good job. In like an hour yesterday, I saw 3 cats catch at least 4 mice. I don't know how many they caught when I wasn't looking at them. Anyway, if other minerals are out of balance or your pH is too high or too low, it can be very difficult or impossible for the plants to absorb some of those nutrients, even if they are present. So we did some soil testing, did some mineral amending with some things that are just naturally lacking in the soils in this part of the country, and then repeated that test the next year. Obviously, from the plant results, we had been able to make a large improvement, and that also showed that on paper. So we did a few more minor adjustments that fall with, a few more, basically some of the same minerals, ones that were still a little low. You don't want to over add something all at once because you can't take it out once you put it in. So you want to go about that a little slowly. And then this year we had, if you watched our last video, record rainfall. I think everything always does better with natural rainfall, even though we fortunately have good spring water here that we can water with if we need to. It's still better when it's real rainfall. So there was plenty of water this year. We watered very, very little. That probably helped. And there was almost no freezes this summer. Normally we get freezes year-round. So what I'm growing here in the summer is what most people would consider a winter garden in most climates. We plant the things that are fairly frost hardy, and we have the frost covers, which you've probably seen in many videos, but they're all pulled out of the garden for the winter now, and so on. So we're growing a winter garden here. And it'll be really cool to see if we actually go over the 1,000-pound mark of produce out of here. Now, if you live in a warmer climate, which is most places, depending how much warmer or whatever, you can probably grow somewhere between 2 to 3 to 4 times this much in the same garden space. Again, this is, yes, we have about 3 acres here on the property, but this garden is only taking up, like I said, 600 square feet. That kind of gives you the best way you could measure it and compare it to a space you have, because you probably won't lay the beds out the same way or have the exact same path design or whatever, but that's how much productive space there is, and that is what it has produced. And if you are in a place that's warm enough, this would be your winter garden. You could grow lots of other things in the spring, summer, and fall. Or if you're a little cooler than that, you could probably grow these kinds of crops spring and fall, and warmer things in the summer, and so on. You get the idea. But if we can produce it here, where we officially don't have any frost-free growing season, then I'm fairly confident that anybody, anywhere, can produce something. Or if you say, oh my goodness, I don't need 1,000 pounds of produce, or 1,000 pounds is plenty. If you can do this 3 or 4 times in a year, you could have a 200 square foot amount of bed space, and feasibly do 3 sets of crops in there and get the same volume of produce that we're getting here in our single, very short, almost non-existent season. Anyway, so I just want to continue to encourage anybody who's inspired to try to produce a little bit of their own food, even if you think, oh, I don't have a lot of space, I don't have a 20-acre farm, etc. You don't need 20 acres to do anything like this. You don't even need an acre. I can't keep after, this summer apparently I can't keep after taking care of 600 square feet. No way could I keep after a whole acre garden. And it's producing plenty of food for us, which is a wonderful thing. Come the clouds. I don't know if we'll get done here before we get rained or snowed out of the garden again or not. Anyway, I had a pretty long, if you're going to ask what in the world are we doing with all that food, do we sell to farmers markets and so on, that's kind of questions I get a lot. No, we don't. We certainly do, when we have plenty of stuff, we share it with various friends. Somebody comes over and we'll send them home with some beets or some extra carrots or, those kinds of things, just for their enjoyment because they're friends of ours. But otherwise, we eat everything that we grow ourselves. Or, can it, freeze it, preserve it, dehydrate it, etc. And then often serve those things when we have friends over for meals as well. But largely, it's consumed by us. And I talked a good bit about what we eat through the course of a year and why. If you want to go back and look up a video from last fall sometime on do you eat 2,000 pounds of food in a year? There's another one that was going to be a pretty nice beet until a mouse ate half of it. And we had mice eating some in the carrot bed as well. Once again, I think we just need more kitty cats around, but this is what they'll do. This is how I know it's not a pocket gopher, which we've had problems with in the past. It is, they always pull things down from the bottom of the plant. This is nibbled from the top. It would have been sitting in the soil like that, and they nibbled off all the top. That's what mice and voles and things like that do. So, I think we'll have plenty of beets. That one's chewed out enough. It's just going to go in the compost. But there is some ice in the soil still there from the other week. We did have, I think, 4 days in a row where it actually did not get above freezing, even during the day. 32 or 29 or something in that neighborhood each of those days, and then single digits at night. So this stuff froze pretty hard. But it has defrosted a little bit, though. I see ice crystals in the soil there in spots, so not fully defrosted. And my goal is to get these out of here. The ground needs to be somewhat defrosted to do that. And then that pile of compost you can probably see behind there is what I will be spreading on top of each of the garden beds in preparation. I always try to do that in the fall in preparation for them being ready for growing first thing in the spring, because we'll replant the minute basically that the snow is off the ground. That's how it works out most years. We don't have a last frost date, so we're never waiting on a last frost date. Anyway, so it's exciting. And yes, we eat the food. A little pantry area that Clay built in the corner of the shop, which you might or might not get to see a video of some of how we set that up after a bit, but it does take some space to store food when you produce a lot of it. And anything we want to produce, we of course have to do in the summer of this kind of stuff, because we can't grow any of this in our winter climate, not without some kind of greenhouse or cold frame, which is certainly on the wish list for one day, but we aren't there yet. So we do have to have some storage space. But that has been working out well. And yeah, we try to eat a large proportion, and certainly not all of it. But I would guess this year we're probably close to producing at least 50% of all the food we eat in the year. We still buy some other things just for variety or because we like them. For me, that'd be chocolate. For Clay, that'd be coffee. And those are not things we're going to be growing here in Wyoming. But, and then some other things just, like I said, for variety. But we are producing a significant portion of what we consume. And so to some degree, we consume more of the things that we can produce. That goes both ways. People say, why don't you plant sweet corn and tomatoes and watermelons and all kinds of things? Well, they are not frost-hardy crops. They simply don't grow here. That doesn't mean I don't like some of them. And there's some that I would love to eat more of, like sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. But they require consistent warm temperatures to grow. We don't have that. Whereas white potatoes by which I mean all the golds, reds, everything in that family that's not a sweet potato. They grow quite well in cold areas, so we eat more of them because we can't grow them here. And that's just kind of how we plan a lot of our stuff. The other thing that I think was largely helpful this year, because we did produce not only a record total volume of food out of the garden, but a record individual crops, like the largest carrot I've ever grown, by far the largest cabbage head. You guys probably saw a clip of that in the last video. If you're wondering, when we weighed that thing, that single cabbage head came in at 28.4 pounds. That was all cleaned up. Clay is doing a wonderful job on beating back our grass on our boundary here behind me. He was working on the other bed off to the side earlier. And anyway, 28.4 pounds. That was like the cleaned up head. You would eat that whole thing. That made me have to look up. That was by far the biggest cabbage head I've ever grown or seen. Made me have to look up what the world record was. I didn't think we had a world record, but I wondered if we were anywhere close. Well, the answer is no, not even remotely. World record cold season crops seem to mostly come out of Alaska, where the world record cabbage was, I think, somewhere like 138 pounds. So we were, well over 100 pounds shy of a record. But it was a record for us. So we've had, record volume of food and record individual crops as well. And I attribute some of that for sure to our soil is just beautiful compared to what it started out as when you stick your hands in it and do things like this, compared to the muddy, clayey, hard, packed, dead-looking soil that was on this property when we started. This is soft, and my hands are cold because it's damp and there's an ice in here. But it's soft. It's full of microbes and organic matter, and I definitely credit that with a good bit of the wonderful harvest for sure. The other thing we did, that I've talked about a little bit over the last year, because I've been gardening in one form or another for 30-something years of my life now, and this was brand new things I've learned in the last couple of years. This is the kind of thing where I think you can learn for probably beyond an entire lifetime. There will always be more to learn. Is about using fermented weed water as a fertilizer. Now, you guys have seen a few videos, if you go back through the channel, where I made that, just pulling up weeds of whatever kinds, putting them in a bucket, covering with preferably rainwater, and letting it rot until it gets really stinky. And it does, it gets very, very stinky. But then what we've done with that is through the course of the summer, I did this a little bit last fall, and then we did it, I think it was 4 times this summer. I had great plans of doing this every week through the summer. And like a lot of other great plans, we were too busy and that's not what happened. But we did get it done about 4 times. Just put it in, you could use a little hand spray bottle if you're covering a smaller area. We had a couple of those little gallon pump sprayers. And just mix it, about a cup of your rotty weed water with a gallon of water. Seemed to be plenty strong enough. And then we actually went around the whole property and misted that onto the leaves in the evening when it'd be cool and the moisture would stay there for a little bit. If you're in a more humid climate, it may be better to do in the morning. In the morning here, we're so dry, things just evaporate off right away. But my hands are going numb. We'd mist that onto the leaves of all of the plants around here. Everything in the garden, just every bed, go around and give it a spritz. We did it on all our berry bushes, orchard trees, everything. And that really, really seemed to make a massive difference. Not only do plants apparently pull nutrients from the soil as they grow, they also, if the plant is well nourished enough, the above ground part, it can feed nutrients back into the soil. And this is a brief theory. Go look up some of Nigel Palmer's work, or Hugh Richards has a YouTube channel where he goes into a lot more detail in using some of these things. It's beautiful gardens in the UK, a lot different climate than ours, but beautiful, beautiful gardens. Anyway, there's another mouse chewed of one. And if you're wondering, it's hard to tell now, all the foliage is frozen, but there was 3 different colors of beet here. These were candy striped choiga ones. These were, I believe, the dark reds, and those were, golden candy striped dark reds in the middle. The plants, have nutrients in a form that's available to plants. So when you simply ferment plants into water, all the nutrients that leach out are in a form that is available to plants because that's where they came from. Anyway, there's probably a bunch more science-y stuff to that you could get into. All I know is that everything seemed to do fabulously well with that program and did not cost anything other than our time to walk around and play it, which actually I think is pretty fun. I don't know what you thought.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I always think it's kind of relaxing and fun to go around misting that water onto everything.
Yeah, it's a nice way because you do it after the sun's down, so
it's kind of relaxing.
Yeah.
But it was no other expense, did not require anything to be imported from wherever to the property, and we have got record crops. So that's something I can highly recommend that I think anybody could do. With the most expense you might have to get is buy a little spray bottle or a little pump sprayer. I wouldn't have wanted to go around our whole property and do all the trees and bushes with a hand spray bottle. My hand would have been too sore. But seemed to be incredibly effective. I'd say some of our record crops show that. The biggest overnight change I could see, this was something we observed that was pretty crazy, was we have some, not in the garden, but some carragana bushes, Siberian pea shrubs. Those are the same plant, 2 different names for it. And they're generally hardy in this climate. They make a good windbreak, they make beautiful flowers. The bees love the flowers. They make kind of a little pea pod that's something birds like. So they're useful for many things. But we've planted a few more each year. So we have some of varying ages here on the property. And we planted a few more this spring. And by midsummer at one point, the new ones were all just looking kind of stressed out compared to our ones that have been here for a year or 2. They didn't have their roots out as wide and established and all of that yet. But we happened to do our Roddy weed water spray on everything one evening. And the next morning, we noticed that the bushes that have been kind of looking yellow and stressed, the new ones, were all dark green, healthy, and it seemed crazy that could change just overnight. And I thought, well, it was our one little bit of a drier spell that we had this summer. Maybe they were just a little bit, stressed from lack of water. I didn't think they'd gotten too dry, but I thought maybe it's that, because it seems a little crazy that even with foliar feeding, which means feeding it through the leaves, something like that, it just seemed weird to me it could change that fast. So I just kind of filed that away in the memory banks, and then it was maybe 3 weeks later, you notice they were starting to look a little stressed again, just kind of yellowing and so on. And I said, well, let's try this. We don't have any big change in the water or rain or anything, so we're going to do our weed water and see if we see an overnight change again. And sure enough, the next morning, they were back to bright, rich, healthy-looking green. So I can't tell you all the details of how it works. I can just tell you I'm pretty sure it does work. So if you want a gardening tip that I wish I'd known about many years ago, check out rotting your extra weeds, or it could be extra beet tops or whatever you have around. And yes, I do know that beet tops are great to eat. We can grow so many leafy green things here through the summer, we cannot keep up with eating all of the versions of leafy green things that grow well in our climate. And at this point, these are too frozen. I'm not wanting to save any more of these. They'll all go into the compost and recycle back into the soil. But anyway, check out doing something like that. I think you will find, will probably do wonders for the health of your plants and your soil and your food production. So I have to highly, highly recommend that. If you're more of a paper book person, not YouTube, Nigel Palmer has a book called something like The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Organic Soil Amendments Made at Home, or something along those lines. I'm bad at remembering titles, but it's not a very large book, but it has a lot of very useful information, and I'm going to pick up a copy of that. We have one. So that is our kind of wrapping up the end of the season garden here. So you probably don't want to listen to me while I pull all the rest of these beets out. So we'll probably just do a time lapse here. I'll try to pop in at the end after we weigh whatever we get here. I'll tell you guys if we made it to 1,000 pounds for the year or not out of this little space. Okay, we're at 965 pounds of food before this. That bucket weighs 28 pounds and the bucket itself is about 2.5 pounds. That's what most of our plastic buckets seem to weigh. So if I subtract 2.5 pounds from that, that takes us down to 25.5. And we had 965 pounds before. So that means we didn't quite make it to 1,000 pounds, but really, really close, which is super exciting. And yes, in the top of the bucket here, I threw in a few onions and a couple other things I found out there in the garden still as we were cleaning up. Thanks for spending your valuable time with us.
I hope you learned something interesting and useful.
Or found something beautiful here.